I thought the joke was funny. Everyone was laughing at the rooftop party, clinking glasses, and I felt clever for once. Why did my husband leave without saying goodbye, and why did his brother stop answering my messages the next morning? I never imagined that one joke about his body could cost me my marriage, my friends, and my reputation at work. My name is Lilith Avondale. I am 32 years old, and I work as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech firm downtown. I have always thought of myself as confident, someone who knows how to read a room and make people laugh, and I believed that being bold and funny meant I was living life on my own terms without letting anyone else dictate what I could say or do. My husband Owen is 34, a systems analyst who spends most of his time at his desk with spreadsheets and code, and while I love him, I always felt he was a little too serious, a little too careful, and sometimes I wondered if he understood what it meant to really enjoy life the way I did. It started in a pharmacy queue on a Tuesday morning in late April, a moment so small I barely registered it at the time. I was waiting to pick up a prescription, scrolling through my phone under the bright fluorescent lights that hummed above the rows of vitamins and over-the-counter medicines, when a message popped up from Marcus, my gym trainer. It was just a winking emoji and a short line saying he would see me Thursday and calling me champion, but it made me smile in a way I had not smiled in weeks. I angled my phone slightly away from the older woman standing beside me because I did not want her to see my screen, though I could not have explained why that mattered. What I did not know was that Owen was standing 2 rows behind me in that same queue, holding a bottle of pain reliever and watching the way I tilted my phone and the small private smile that crossed my face. That evening we were sitting on the living room sofa, and Owen asked me why I had been texting my trainer so often, especially after the gym closed for the night. He mentioned that he had seen me at the pharmacy and noticed the way I moved my phone, and he asked if everything was all right. I told him Marcus was just friendly and professional, someone who sent motivational messages to all his clients, and I said Owen was reading too much into something that was completely normal. Owen said he was not accusing me of anything, but he wanted to understand why late-night messages felt necessary when the gym was not even open. I called him insecure and said modern friendships were not supposed to be a threat. Then I turned my back to him and opened Instagram to scroll through photos of people I barely knew, ending the conversation before it could go anywhere uncomfortable. Later that night, around 10 to 20, Owen tried again while we were in the bedroom. He asked if I could keep my gym conversations during gym hours, pointing out that one of the messages had come in near midnight. I said Marcus kept odd hours because he had clients in different time zones, and I added that Owen would not understand because he did not work out the way I did. Owen asked what we talked about so late, and I said it was mostly motivation and scheduling, nothing that should concern him. He went quiet after that, moving his pillow to the far side of the bed, and I assumed he was sulking because I had refused to apologize for something that did not need an apology. The next morning, I saw Owen's coffee mug sitting on the opposite side of the kitchen counter from mine, a tiny change in our routine that felt deliberate even though neither of us mentioned it. He left for work early without kissing me goodbye, and I felt annoyed but also strangely powerful, as if his reaction proved I still had control over his emotions, and that meant I mattered more than I feared I did. That evening, I walked past the living room desk and saw him at his laptop, minimizing a browser tab the moment I came close. I caught a glimpse of a cloud storage page before it disappeared, and when I asked what he was doing, he said he was organizing work files. I did not press further because I convinced myself it was nothing important, just another sign of his obsessive need to file and sort every little detail of his life. On Friday night, my phone lit up with a calendar notification that Owen had set. It was titled with a cafe name and a time, 9:30 in the morning, with no other explanation attached. I asked him what the appointment was for, and he said it was personal, and he would handle it himself. I mocked him for being secretive and said he was overreacting to a few harmless text messages, but he did not reply, just plugged his phone into the charger and placed it face down on the nightstand. The silence between us felt thick, and for the first time I wondered if I had pushed too far. But I shook the thought away and told myself he would get over it the way he always did. Owen asked why I needed to text Marcus near midnight when the gym closed at 10, and he sat on the edge of the sofa holding his phone so I could see the pharmacy timestamp if I wanted proof. He pointed out that I had angled my screen away from him, a small detail that felt too specific to ignore, and he asked if I could explain what they were discussing at such a late hour. I said Marcus was planning my next workout cycle and sometimes sent motivational quotes when he had free time, and I framed it as something completely innocent that Owen was twisting into something suspicious. Owen asked if it was normal for trainers to send quotes after bedtime, and I told him he was making an innocent professional relationship sound like something it was not. He suggested we could both agree to keep professional contacts during work hours only, a reasonable boundary that I immediately rejected because I said it sounded like he was trying to control my friendships, and I accused him of letting his insecurity become my problem instead of dealing with it himself. Later, Owen mentioned that he had seen me smile at the pharmacy in a way he had not seen in months, and he did not accuse me directly, but asked if something about Marcus made me happier than the time we spent together did. He suggested we could talk to someone neutral, maybe a counsellor, before the distance between us grew too wide to cross. I laughed and said counselling was for people with real problems, not for couples who were fine except for one partner being overly jealous. I told him I was allowed to have friends and that his constant suspicion was exhausting, and I left the room before he could say anything else because I did not want to hear another word about boundaries or respect or any of the other things he kept bringing up. Owen's phone buzzed late that night with a muted call, the screen lighting up with the words, "Private number" in plain white text, and he stepped into the hallway to answer it, closing the door behind him so I could only hear the low, measured tone of his voice through the wall. I stood in the living room trying to listen, but all I caught were a few careful words that did not make sense on their own, and when he came back inside a few minutes later, his face was calm and unreadable. I asked who had called, and he said it was nothing I needed to worry about, which only made me more curious and more convinced that he was overreacting to something small. What I did not know then was that Owen had just scheduled his first quiet consultation, the beginning of a process I would not understand until it was far too late to stop. By the next week, things at work started to shift in small ways I barely noticed at first. I was in the office break room on a Wednesday morning, pouring coffee and chatting with Simone, my younger co-worker who always seemed to admire the way I handled myself, when she asked if I was seeing someone new because my mood had been lighter lately. I laughed and said no, but I mentioned that my husband was a bit boring even though he was stable, and Simone giggled in a way that made me feel clever and bold. Another co-worker named Jason walked in just as I finished the sentence, and he raised an eyebrow but did not say anything. A reaction I dismissed as him being overly serious, the way so many people in that office were. That Thursday evening, I went to the gym for my usual session, and Marcus leaned close while explaining a new stretch, his hand resting on my shoulder a little longer than it needed to. I saw another woman named Carla watching us in the mirror, exchanging a glance with her friend, but I ignored it because I liked the attention and I did not think anyone had the right to judge how I managed my friendships. After the session, Marcus suggested we grab smoothies, and I agreed without hesitation because it felt good to spend time with someone who made me feel interesting and alive. We walked along the riverside embankment around 6:45, the water reflecting the last light of the day, and Marcus joked about my uptight husband after I mentioned that Owen had questioned my late-night texts. Marcus said Owen should loosen up and stop being so controlling, and I agreed, feeling validated in a way I had not felt at home in months. What I did not see was Owen's car parked across the street with the engine off and the windows cracked, his dashboard camera recording the timestamp, and the sound of my laughter as Marcus and I strolled along the water like we had all the time in the world. When I got home that night, Owen asked where I had been after the gym, and I said I had grabbed a smoothie without thinking much of it. He asked if Marcus had been there, and I said yes casually, as if it was no big deal. Owen asked why I had not mentioned it earlier, and I said it slipped my mind because it was not important. He went quiet after that, nodding slowly in a way that made me feel like he was keeping score. And later that night I saw him writing something in a small notebook while I was in the shower, though I did not think to ask what it was. On Saturday morning, Owen's brother Daniel called to plan their mother's upcoming birthday dinner, and I overheard Daniel asking if Owen was all right because his voice sounded flat and distant. Owen said work had been busy, but Daniel pressed a little, asking if things at home were stable, and Owen paused before saying he was handling it. Daniel sent a text later that I saw on Owen's phone screen when he left it on the counter, a short message saying he was there if Owen needed to talk, and that small exchange made me uneasy in a way I could not quite explain. By Sunday evening, I walked past the desk in the corner of the living room and saw Owen labeling a thin binder with the word auto in neat handwriting, sliding it into a drawer that he closed carefully. I asked what he was organising, and he said maintenance records for the car, which sounded plausible enough that I joked about his obsession with filing every little thing. He did not smile, and the silence that followed felt heavier than I wanted it to be. Owen asked why I chose to walk along the river with Marcus instead of coming straight home, and he mentioned the embankment by name and the exact time, 6:45, because he had driven past on his way back from an errand and seen us together. I said it was a spontaneous walk, and Marcus had needed to vent about his own relationship troubles, framing it as an innocent moment between friends. Owen asked if it was normal for a trainer to vent to a client for 40 minutes beside the water, and I accused him of twisting something harmless into something ugly. He asked if I could see how it looked from his perspective, the late texts and the private walks and my habit of dismissing every question he raised, but I told him his perspective was the problem, and he needed to trust me more instead of constantly looking for reasons to doubt me. Later, Owen sat at the kitchen table and asked if I wanted our marriage to feel like a partnership or if I preferred the distance that had been growing between us. He said he was not interested in fighting, just in finding some honest ground where we could both stand, and he pointed to the embankment walk and the gym sessions that had stretched into evening outings. He asked what I wanted him to accept as normal, and I said normal was having friends and not being interrogated every time I left the house. Owen suggested we could set boundaries together, agreeing that late texts and solo outings that felt like dates would stop so we could rebuild trust, but I said boundaries sounded like control, and I accused him of trying to isolate me from anyone who made me feel good. He stood up, gathered his notebook, and left the room without another word, his silence louder than any argument we had ever had. My phone lit up later that evening with a notification from Priya, one of my closest friends, showing a tagged photo of her at a rooftop bar with a caption promising a big birthday bash on Saturday. The image showed Priya, Marcus, and 3 other friends posing with drinks in hand, and I felt a surge of excitement because the party sounded like exactly the kind of fun I needed. Owen glanced at my screen from across the room before looking away, his expression unreadable, and I assumed he would skip the event the way he often skipped things he found uncomfortable. What I did not know was that Priya's husband, Anjali, planned to record toasts and speeches for a keepsake video, and that single decision would capture a moment I could never take back. Saturday night arrived with clear skies and the kind of warm breeze that made the rooftop bar feel like the center of the world. 14 people gathered around high tables under strings of lights that glowed against the darkening sky, and I held a cocktail in one hand, feeling bold and alive in a way I had not felt in weeks. Marcus stood near me, grinning and making jokes that kept the group laughing, and the metal railing under my palm was cold and solid, grounding me in the moment. A diesel horn blared from the street 6 floors below, a distant sound that only made the rooftop feel more elevated and separate from the ordinary world. Around 8:35, Priya raised her glass for a toast, thanking everyone for coming to celebrate her birthday, and the crowd cheered and clinked glasses in a loose, happy circle. Someone mentioned how long Priya and her husband Anjali had been together, 8 years of marriage that looked easy and comfortable. and Marcus joked that loyalty like that was rare these days. I laughed, feeling the warmth of the alcohol and the attention of the group, and I decided to add my own commentary to the conversation because I wanted to be part of the fun, to be the one who made everyone laugh the way Marcus did. I leaned in and said my husband was loyal, but not exactly impressive in other departments, and someone asked what I meant. I lowered my voice in a way that felt theatrical and clever, and I said Owen had the smallest size among all his friends, adding that I had joked once about needing a magnifying glass just to find it. The group erupted in laughter, Marcus high-fived me, and I felt a rush of validation and power, as if I had finally proven I was as funny and fearless as I wanted everyone to believe. Priya's smile faltered for a second, but I did not notice because I was too busy soaking in the applause and the way people leaned in closer, wanting to hear more. What I did not see was Owen standing near the bar entrance, about 20 feet away, holding 2 drinks he had been bringing over to our table. His face went blank, the kind of empty expression that looked calm but was anything but, and he set the drinks down on an empty table without saying a word. He walked toward the elevator, and by the time I turned around to look for him, he was gone, the crowd still laughing and clinking glasses, as if nothing had happened. Around 8:52, I asked Priya if she had seen Owen leave, and she said she thought he went downstairs. I shrugged and said he was probably tired, dismissing it with a wave of my hand, and Priya asked if the joke had been necessary. I said it was funny and Owen needed to stop being so sensitive about everything, and Marcus agreed, calling Owen uptight and boring. Simone, who had arrived late and missed the joke itself, heard the recap and looked uncomfortable, her smile fading as she glanced toward the elevator. A few other people in the group exchanged looks, but the party continued, the music and laughter drowning out any second thoughts I might have had if I had been paying attention. I got home around 9:40 and found Owen sitting on the top step of the apartment stairwell landing, his head in his hands, the hallway light casting long shadows across the floor. I asked why he had left without saying goodbye, my words slightly slurred from the drinks, and he looked up and asked if I really said what I said in front of everyone. I laughed and told him it was just a joke, something to lighten the mood, and I said everyone had laughed so it must have been funny. He asked if I understood what I had done, not just the words but the place and the audience, and I told him he was overreacting the way he always did when I tried to have fun. He stood, unlocked the apartment door, and walked straight to the guest room without another word, and I called after him, saying he was being dramatic, but the door closed quietly behind him, and I was left standing alone in the hallway. Sunday morning came early, and Owen woke before 7, showered, and left the apartment with a gym bag slung over his shoulder. I assumed he had gone to work out, maybe to blow off steam, but he actually drove to a quiet cafe and met his brother Daniel for breakfast. I did not know about the meeting until much later, but Daniel listened without interrupting as Owen explained what had happened, and he suggested that Owen start keeping a detailed record of these moments because words alone would not be enough if things continued to spiral. That evening, I tried to start a conversation, asking if Owen was still upset, and he said he was fine but needed space to think. I accused him of punishing me with silence, a tactic I said was manipulative and unfair, and he replied that he was not punishing anyone, just trying to figure out what came next. I asked what that meant, and he said he would handle it appropriately, then walked to the desk and opened a thin binder where he added a handwritten note with the date and the name of the rooftop bar. I saw him writing but could not read the words from where I stood, and a flicker of worry passed through me before I convinced myself he was bluffing, trying to scare me into apologizing when I had done nothing wrong. Owen asked why I needed an audience of 14 people to mock his body, and he sat on the edge of the sofa with his hands folded, his voice low and controlled in a way that made every word feel deliberate. He mentioned the rooftop bar, the cold metal railing I had leaned against, and the exact phrase I had used about needing a magnifying glass, and he asked if I had thought about how he would feel hearing that in front of mutual friends. I said it was a joke and everyone had laughed, which meant it landed the way jokes are supposed to land, and I told him he was making a bigger deal out of it than it deserved. Owen asked if I understood that everyone laughing did not make it acceptable, and he asked what I expected him to do now, pretend it never happened, and keep showing up to parties with the same people who had heard me humiliate him. I said he was blowing things out of proportion, and when he asked if I could apologize just once without defending myself, I refused, saying I would not apologize for being honest and funny in a room full of adults who understood humor. Owen suggested we sit down with someone neutral, maybe a counselor or mediator, because he did not think we could fix this on our own anymore. He referenced the joke, the gym trainer, and the pattern of dismissing his concerns every time he raised them, and he said he was not trying to control me, but trying to save whatever respect we had left for each other. I said counselling was for people who could not communicate, and I communicated just fine, so the problem was obviously his inability to listen. Owen asked if humiliating him in public was my idea of good communication, and I said he was twisting my words again, that the real issue was his refusal to accept that I was allowed to have a sense of humour. He stood, walked to the guest room, and said he would not keep having the same conversation if I refused to hear him, and the door closed between us like a wall I did not know how to cross. Owen's phone buzzed later that night, a message preview lighting up the screen with a name I recognised, Anjali, Priya's husband. The message said he needed to talk about something from the party and asked if they could meet the next day, and Owen replied with a time and place, his fingers moving quickly and deliberately. I did not see the exchange because I was in the other room scrolling through photos of the party, replaying the moment of laughter in my mind and convincing myself that Owen would cool off in a few days the way he always did. What I did not know was that Anjali had recorded the joke by accident while filming toasts, and he was about to hand Owen a piece of evidence that would change everything. Monday afternoon, Owen left work early and met Anjali at a cafe near his office, a quiet place with small tables and the hum of an espresso machine in the background. Anjali handed him a thumb drive, explaining that he had been recording toasts and speeches for Priya as a keepsake video, but his phone had captured my joke in full, audio clear and unmistakable. He said he thought Owen should know, and Owen thanked him, his voice steady but his hands shaking slightly as he slipped the drive into his jacket pocket. He listened to the recording once in his car before driving home, and the sound of my laughter and the crowd's reaction played back in a way that made the whole moment feel even worse than it had been in person. Tuesday afternoon, Owen stopped at a print shop near the parking garage pay station and picked up a stack of printed files, screenshots of text messages, timestamps from his car's GPS showing the embankment walk, and a transcript of the audio from the rooftop. He labelled them in a clear folder with the title Records, April, and I saw him loading the folder into his car trunk later that evening when I glanced out the window. I assumed it was work material, something boring and technical, and I did not ask because I did not want another argument about things that did not matter. Wednesday evening, Owen's mother Karen called to confirm the family dinner planned for Saturday, and Owen hesitated before saying he would come but I might not. Karen pressed him gently, asking if everything was all right, and Owen said things were difficult without going into detail. Karen said I was always welcome, but her tone was cautious, the kind of careful politeness that meant she already sensed something was wrong, and Owen said he would explain more when he saw her in person. Saturday arrived, and the dinner at Karen's suburban house felt tense from the moment I walked in the door. The kitchen smelled like roasted chicken and fresh bread, and the table was set for 5 people, Karen, Daniel, Daniel's wife Emma, Owen, and me. I arrived late, smiling brightly and trying to lighten the mood because Owen had been distant all week, and I thought a family dinner would remind him that we were still a unit. I made a joke about Owen being grumpy lately, trying to get a laugh, and Karen asked what had happened between us. I said Owen had overreacted to something I said at a party, and then, without thinking it through, I added with a light laugh that I had made a tiny joke about his size, and he had taken it way too personally. Karen's face hardened, the warmth draining from her expression, and she asked if I had said that in public. I said it was just friends, no big deal, and Karen said that sounded cruel and disrespectful. Not funny. I said modern couples joke like that all the time, that it was normal and Owen was being too sensitive. But Karen did not smile, and the silence around the table felt thick and uncomfortable. Daniel, sitting across from me, quietly held his phone under the table, recording the exchange without anyone noticing, and Emma looked down at her plate, clearly wishing she was anywhere else. After dinner, Karen pulled Owen aside in the hallway, and I heard her low voice asking if he was all right, and Owen said he was managing. Karen said I was not welcome at future family gatherings until I apologized, and Owen thanked her quietly, his voice steady and resigned. I overheard part of the conversation through the wall and confronted Owen in the car afterward, accusing him of turning his family against me, and he said I had done that myself by repeating the joke in front of people who cared about him. I called him manipulative and said he was trying to isolate me, but he drove home in silence, his hands tight on the steering wheel, and I knew I had lost ground I could not get back. Sunday morning, I walked past the living room desk and saw Owen's laptop open to a desktop folder labelled Archive, Personal, and inside were subfolders with names like Audio, Photos, and Notes. I asked what he was archiving, my voice sharper than I intended, and he said household records, a vague answer that told me nothing. I mocked him for being paranoid, saying he was acting like someone preparing for war, and he closed the laptop without a word and left the apartment for a long walk. The uneasy feeling in my chest grew stronger, but I pushed it down and told myself he was just trying to scare me into backing down. Owen asked why I repeated a version of the joke at his mother's kitchen table when I knew it had hurt him, and he mentioned the exact time, around 6:20, and the fact that his mother and brother had been sitting right there listening. He asked what I was trying to prove by bringing it up again in front of his family, and I said I was trying to lighten the mood because he had been cold and distant all week. Owen asked if I thought humiliating him again would somehow fix the damage from the first time, and he pointed out that I had been given a chance to apologize privately, and instead I chose to justify the joke to people who loved him. I said his family was overreacting just like he was, and when he asked if I could see a pattern in my behavior, the gym trainer and the rooftop and now the family dinner, I told him the only pattern I saw was his refusal to accept that the world had changed and people were allowed to joke about things that used to be private. Later, Owen sat across from me at the kitchen table and said he needed to know if I actually wanted to stay married, and he made it clear he was not issuing a threat, just asking for honest clarity. He listed the moments that had brought us to this point: the embankment walk, the rooftop joke, the repeat at his mother's house, and he said he had tried asking calmly, suggesting counselling and setting boundaries, but every single attempt had been dismissed or mocked. He asked what I wanted from him: acceptance of public humiliation or an end to the marriage, and I said he was being manipulative by framing it as a binary choice. Owen said it was not manipulation, it was the reality we were living in, and I accused him of planning something behind my back. He stood and said he was done talking in circles, and I yelled after him as he walked away, but he did not turn around, and the space between us felt wider than it had ever been. Owen's phone alarm went off later that afternoon, a quiet chime with the label Summit Centre 3:15 p.m., and he dismissed it quickly before I could ask what it meant. I demanded to know where Summit Centre was and what the appointment was for, and he said it was a routine matter he would share when it was appropriate. I Googled the name later and found it was a business complex with legal and financial offices, and a wave of panic hit me harder than I wanted to admit. But I convinced myself Owen was bluffing, using scare tactics to make me apologise when I had done nothing that justified this level of drama. Monday morning, I stood in the bedroom doorway and asked Owen if we could talk, and he said he was running late for work. I insisted, blocking his path slightly, and he stopped and listened with his arms crossed. I said I had been thinking about what he said, and maybe I had rushed into some of those jokes without considering how they sounded, a halfway acknowledgement that I hoped would ease the tension. Owen asked if I was saying I was wrong, and I hedged, saying everyone makes mistakes and maybe I could have been more careful. He said that was not an apology, just another way of avoiding responsibility, and I accused him of setting traps, demanding perfection when I was clearly trying to meet him halfway. He said halfway was not enough when the harm was total, and he walked past me and out the door, leaving me standing there with my words hanging uselessly in the air. Tuesday afternoon, I texted Marcus asking if we could meet for coffee, hoping to talk to someone who understood me, but he replied that he was busy. I texted again on Wednesday, and there was no reply at all, and by Thursday I checked Instagram and saw he had posted photos with another woman at the gym, both of them smiling and looking comfortable together. I sent him a direct message asking if he was ignoring me, and he replied briefly, saying he thought it was best if we kept things professional and wishing me well. The message felt like a door slamming shut, and I was stunned and angry because I had thought Marcus actually cared about our friendship. But it turned out he was only interested when I seemed carefree and available, not when consequences started to appear. Wednesday evening, I tried to initiate physical affection with Owen, reaching for his hand on the sofa, but he gently pulled away and said he needed space. I accused him of punishing me, using distance as a weapon, and he said he was not punishing anyone, just protecting himself from more hurt. I asked what he was protecting himself from, and he said from more humiliation, more dismissals, more proof that I did not respect him. The words landed hard, and I demanded to know what he had been planning in all those private meetings and calendar entries. But he said I would find out soon enough, and everything he was doing was legal and appropriate. For the first time, genuine fear crept into my chest, a cold weight that I could not laugh away or dismiss as overreaction. Thursday, I opened the group chat I shared with my closest friends and posted a meme, trying to keep things light and normal, but only one person reacted with a quick emoji. I noticed Priya had not replied to anything in days, and when I sent her a direct message asking if she was okay, she replied tersely that she was busy with work. Simone also stopped engaging with my posts, and the silence from people who used to fill my phone with messages felt louder than any argument. Friday afternoon, I saw Owen at the living room desk, organising papers into a final neat stack, and he placed them inside a courier envelope that had a law firm's return address printed in the corner. I demanded to know what was in the envelope, my voice rising, and Owen said it was personal business that did not concern me yet. I grabbed his arm, trying to stop him from leaving, and he calmly removed my hand and said, touching him without permission was not acceptable, his voice firm and steady in a way that shocked me. He walked out of the apartment with the envelope, and I paced the living room for an hour afterward, my hands shaking and my mind racing with worst-case scenarios I had been too confident to consider before. Saturday morning I called Daniel, hoping to reach Owen through his brother, but Daniel said Owen was unavailable and would not be taking calls from me. I asked if Daniel knew what Owen was planning, and Daniel said he knew enough, and I should prepare myself for what was coming. The line went dead before I could respond, and I sat on the sofa staring at my phone, feeling more isolated than I had ever felt in my life. Owen asked if my offer to be more careful meant I actually understood I had been cruel, and he stood in the bedroom doorway with his arms folded, waiting for a real answer. He brought up the exact words I had used at the rooftop party, the phrase about the magnifying glass, and asked if I was prepared to own that publicly and admit it was wrong. I said I was trying to meet him halfway, to show I cared about fixing things, but Owen asked what halfway looked like in practical terms, half an apology, half the respect, half the marriage. I said he was being impossible, demanding perfection when I was clearly making an effort, and he asked if I had told Marcus I was married when we walked along the river together. I deflected, saying Marcus was irrelevant now, But Owen said Marcus was absolutely relevant because he was part of a larger pattern where I sought validation outside our marriage and mocked him inside it. I accused him of keeping score, turning every mistake into ammunition, and he said he was not keeping score, he was keeping a record, and there was a difference I would understand soon enough. Later, Owen sat at the kitchen table one final time and said he was offering me a last chance to talk honestly before things became formal. And he asked if I wanted to explain myself, apologize, or at least acknowledge the harm I had caused. I asked what he meant by formal, and he said it meant he would handle the situation through appropriate channels, using processes designed for situations like ours. I asked if he was threatening me, and he said he was simply informing me of what came next. I switched tactics then, softening my voice and saying I was hurt that he had been so cold and distant that I missed the way we used to be, hoping vulnerability would make him back down. Owen asked if I missed him or just missed having control over him, and I said that was an unfair question. He said unfair was being humiliated in front of mutual friends and family while I called it humour, and when I reached out to touch his hand, he pulled back and said he was finished with conversations that went nowhere. I yelled that he was overreacting and no one would take his side, but he stood, walked to the door, and said quietly that I was wrong about that, then left the apartment without looking back. On Thursday evening, Owen quietly cancelled our joint streaming subscriptions and moved the autopay for our shared car insurance to his personal account, actions he did not announce or explain. I noticed the streaming service was logged out on Friday night and assumed it was a technical glitch, irritated but not alarmed. What I did not understand was that Owen had stopped negotiating entirely and started methodically separating our lives, a silent decision that would become clear only when it was too late to reverse. Friday afternoon, I felt desperate to regain some sense of control. So I posted an Instagram story with a photo of myself at the gym, adding a caption that read, "When you realize some people can't handle a strong, independent woman," followed by a few motivational quotes and a nail polish emoji. I tagged it with hashtags about living my truth and being unapologetic, and I felt a brief surge of power, as if I was reclaiming my narrative. Simone saw the post and took a screenshot, sending it to Priya with a sarcastic comment, and Priya forwarded it to Anjali, who sent it directly to Owen. The post spread through our mutual circle in a matter of hours, and instead of rallying support, it became evidence of my refusal to take responsibility, a public declaration that I believed I was the victim. That single post, confident and defiant, was the point of no return, the moment I crossed a line I could not uncross. Owen's phone lit up with a calendar reminder late Friday night, the screen showing the words 9 a.m. Monday, deliver packet, and he dismissed it without saying anything. I saw the notification and asked what was being delivered, my voice edged with panic, and Owen said I would know by Monday afternoon. I spent the entire weekend checking my phone obsessively, watching as Marcus stayed silent, Priya stopped replying, and the group chat I had relied on for validation went quiet. I told myself Owen was bluffing, that he would not actually follow through, but a small, insistent voice in the back of my mind said he already had. Monday morning arrived cold and bright, and I went to work trying to convince myself everything would blow over the way uncomfortable moments always did. At 8:55, I swiped my badge at the office tower lobby check-in desk, and a man in business casual stepped forward and asked if I was Lilith Avondale. I said yes, my voice uncertain, and he handed me a thick envelope, saying I had been served. Simone stood 10 feet away, her eyes wide, and two other co-workers turned to stare as I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were two sets of documents, a civil complaint for defamation and invasion of privacy, citing the rooftop joke and my Instagram post, complete with audio evidence, witness statements, and time-stamped screenshots, and a petition for divorce with temporary financial orders freezing all joint accounts effective immediately. The complaint demanded a public retraction, monetary damages and attorney fees, and it listed a court date 3 weeks out. I tried to say something, but no words came, and the process server walked away while security asked if I needed help. I shook my head and stumbled toward the elevator, the envelope heavy in my hands and the stares of my co-workers burning into my back. At 9:20, I was called into a meeting with my manager and an HR representative, and they informed me that a formal complaint had been filed about my workplace behavior, specifically discussing private marital details with co-workers in a way that created discomfort. Simone had filed the internal report after seeing my Instagram post, and the HR rep said they were opening an investigation and placing me on administrative leave until it was resolved. I tried to explain that it had just been a joke, that I never meant to make anyone uncomfortable, but the representative said jokes about someone's body shared publicly and repeated at work violated company policy. I left the building in a daze, my badge temporarily deactivated, and stood on the sidewalk trying to process what had just happened. By mid-morning, I found a second notice in my apartment mailbox, a motion for temporary exclusive possession of the apartment, and a freeze on joint credit cards, effective immediately, citing my public humiliation of Owen and my refusal to stop harmful behavior as grounds for emergency relief. I tried to use my credit card to buy coffee, and the transaction was declined, the cashier handing the card back with an apologetic look. I called Owen, and the call went straight to voicemail. I texted him, begging him to talk, saying this was insane and we needed to work it out. But there was no reply. I called Daniel and he answered long enough to say Owen had instructed him not to engage, then hung up before I could say another word. I opened my main friend group chat and saw that 3 people had left, and Priya sent a single message saying she could not support me anymore and hoped I would figure things out. Then she left the group as well. Simone unfollowed me on Instagram, and when I checked my notifications, I saw that a dozen mutual friends had done the same. Tuesday, I went to the supermarket and filled a cart with groceries, but when I reached the checkout lane, my card was declined again, and I had to leave everything behind, walking out past the stares of other shoppers. Wednesday, I toured a tiny studio apartment I could barely afford on my salary alone, and the landlord asked for first month, last month, and a security deposit, amounts I no longer had access to. I sat in my car afterward and tried one last time to text Owen, saying I was sorry and asking if we could please talk before this went any further, and his reply came an hour later, brief and final. He said the time for talking had been before I humiliated him publicly and refused every attempt he made to fix things, and now he was handling the situation appropriately through legal channels, and all future communication should go through his attorney. What I thought gave me power, the confidence to joke about him, the validation from Marcus and my friends, the belief that I could control the narrative and his emotions, was exactly what destroyed me. The joke I made to prove I was bold became the evidence that proved I was cruel. The friends I thought would always support me disappeared when the consequences became real. The records, the witnesses, the calm boundaries Owen set while I mocked him. Those were the things that held real power. And I had been too blind to see it until the lawyer's letterhead was in my hands and the joint accounts were frozen and the apartment I took for granted was no longer mine to keep. Owen moved into a new apartment within 2 weeks, his brother and mother helping him pack and settle in a building across town. The defamation case moved forward, and my attorney advised me to settle and issue a public apology to avoid further damages. But I refused at first, clinging to the belief that I could still win if I explained myself well enough. When my legal fees climbed and my job prospects dimmed after the HR investigation concluded with a formal reprimand, I finally agreed to a brief, awkward retraction posted on social media. A statement that felt hollow and forced, but was the only way to stop the bleeding. Marcus never contacted me again, and when I saw him months later at the gym, he looked through me as if I were invisible. Priya sent a single message almost a year afterward, saying she hoped I had learned something from all of this, but by then the damage was complete and irreversible. I sat alone in my studio apartment, scrolling through photos of the life I used to have, and understood, too late, that the joke was never harmless. And neither was I.